Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Full Count MLB Sports Betting Show presented to you by SportsMemo. My name is Eric Pauly, and I'm with two of the usual suspects for Thursday's MLB sports betting on this show, Dr. Chuck and Jeff Michaels. Chuck, I really hope that this is not our last show. I know the MLB season is unwinding. Of course, we're going to have some playoff content, but I think we're going to be going away from the daily same trio. But I've had an absolute pleasure being with you guys all season long and ready to kick off the show. Jeff, how are you doing? How are you feeling today?
Good. I've actually spent the night at that Guardians game last night. I didn't quite make it through the rain delay, didn't quite make it through extra innings, but we saw some good baseball there for a little bit. So I'm looking forward to talking some baseball with you guys today and looking forward to the weekend too.
Looking forward to it as always. Dr. Chuck, I haven't seen you in a little bit. How are you? Long time no see. How's everything going?
Going pretty well. Yeah, it's been. I've lowered my volume with baseball, but it's gone pretty well. But I still think there's a lot of spots to hit on the diamond here. Even as you said, the shows are winding down, but there's some low hanging fruit out there, especially on days where there's football.
I could not agree more. Odds makers have their eyeballs fixated on what movement is going on, what bets they are taking in college and NFL football games, and they seem to forget a little bit about baseball. And there's certainly been some opportunities to add to that end of season bankroll to either bolster a great season or maybe make a late season comeback if you're having a poor season. But without further ado, we're going to head over to our first roundtable game. We have a great matchup against the Tampa Bay Rays in Cleveland facing the Guardians. The Rays can't seem to get out of their own way. They currently have just a half-game lead over the Mariners for that number 2 spot in the AL wildcard. Of course, the Orioles are 4.5 back. They're still trying to make a little bit of a push. It was very nice to see Tyler Glasnow take the mound last night for Tampa Bay. He's a fantastic talent and will definitely make this team better in the long run. But moving forward, I mean, the Rays, they have such offensive struggles. Their inability to hit might be their Achilles heel this year. And right now in this matchup against the Guardians is the rubber match of the season series. So so hopefully we can end the season series potentially in a tie, or maybe the Guardians are going to go home with the win. You got Jeffrey Springs, a great pitcher going for Tampa Bay. He's 9-4 with a 2.56 ERA and a 1.10 WHIP versus Cal Quantrill, who has been good in his own right. And the Guardians love hitting when he's pitching because he is 14-5 in his starts, 3.49 ERA, 1.24 WHIP. This line opened at TB -115 and Cleveland -105. But since then, Tampa Bay is now a bigger favorite at -124. Cleveland +113 on the money line. The total is sitting at 6.5. We are going to start with Dr. Chuck. Chuck, talk to me. What are you looking at in this game?
Right off the bat, I talk about this every show we have. AL 6.5. I immediately am going to try and find a reason to be on the under. Cal Quantrill is a guy I talk a lot about. Love that guy. He's definitely someone I am looking to back. Maybe not as much as when I see Tristan McKenzie on the slate, but damn close. Jeffrey Springs, I just haven't been able to catch on to being able to find these wins with this guy. I understand, he's got good numbers. He looks good. I don't know what the Rays are doing, and I'm fascinated by what's happening down the stretch here. I think the move has got to be something along the lines of Cleveland's locked. We're all locked into these spots here, especially Cleveland, locked into 3. So they're going to play the Mariners, the Blue Jays, or the Rays 3 times in Progressive next week, and or in 2 weeks, and that's just going to be what it is. And they have to set up for that. They have a little bit of a say in what they can face, and I think the team they're playing tonight is probably the team I'd want to face. If you can avoid, even though they're 3 home games, if you can avoid facing Vlad Guerrero and the guys around him, or Julio Rodriguez and the guys around him, Jeff's probably got a little bit of something to say later in the show about whether or not the Guardians are going to think about who they want to play. I think anytime it's Tito and Kevin Cash, you have a very interesting matchup because of their relationship, and they're probably 2 of the 3, 4, 5 best managers in the sport. I can't imagine being on the over here because, as I say all the time, you give me a 6.5 in an AL game, the Vegas books want nothing more than for just everybody to be like, look at that, 4-3 and I win. And so I would look for ways to be on the under. I see that Garth has already locked in the chat room, has already locked in the Nerfy. Like that, not going to lie to you. A Springs Quantrill Nerfy, find the best spot you can. I will be on that, as I am many Nerfies a day. We already have one in the books today, but I think the Guardians are going to want to play the Rays, and I think the Guardians are going to want to put the Rays into that 6th spot. I would go that direction against the move on the line.
Gotcha. So Dr. Chuck is taking a look at the Rays here. I think it's a very interesting point that you bring up about kind of Cleveland being in sort of a position of power where they, considering they're facing Tampa Bay, they do have a little bit of a say into who they want to face. And they've done really not very well against Cleveland, just 3 against the Rays this season, just 3-2. But you're looking at a Rays team that in the last 5 games, they've scored only 1 run in 3 of those 5 matchups. And again, going into the postseason in the past and all season long, that has been what has hindered the Rays. But they do present some really great starting pitching. Of course, they're a great bullpen team as well. They love to use the openers. But the Tampa Bay Rays pitching staff is what is going to carry them if they are to go far this year. But the Guardians, I think, are certainly a more well-rounded team with the offense and also sporting some great pitching. But now we're going to go to Jeff, of course, the well-known Cleveland Guardian fan and Cleveland resident. You have Chuck going against the Guardians tonight. Do you think there's some value in this matchup, or what do you think that's going to happen with the Cleveland tonight?
I'm gonna leave it to a short yes to answer that question. I think that there's value in this matchup. I've actually been on the show 3 days straight. The opener in this series, my best bet was on Tampa Bay. They won in extra innings. Last night I had a best bet on Tristan McKenzie that missed by 1 strike multiple times last night. So sorry, Nick and Jesse, we were 1 strike away from sweeping the board yesterday on those best bets. And, I'm going back to this game for my best bet tonight. That's the value that I do think is on this game. I was talking to Dr. Chuck actually before this game, and a lot of what I've learned about researching Nerfies and studying that Nerfies, and shout out to Garth over there for that donation too. But we were talking about the Nerfie on this game actually before, because I've learned a lot from him and actually from Eric too, watching these shows, looking at that Nerfie, and that was almost a Nerfie on this game was almost my first Nerfie best bet. So I'm on that one too, but I'll save my actual best bet on this game for the end of this show. So we'll talk a little more later too.
So we are going to keep that suspense going to the end of the show. Nobody knows the Cleveland Guardians like Jeff knows his own team, and he always takes, again, a realistic approach on that. Does not display bias. Chuck, you have
two things I wanted to add that I wasn't sure if Jeff was going to. The Guardians are going for this has been a great month. They've clinched the division. We've been talking about them for 3 months as far as this value to win this division, and they kind of ran away with it. This will be the next win they could get if they can get one today or tomorrow. Is their 20th win of the month. It's just unbelievable the way the Guardians finished this. They also one play against maybe the Guardians is they finish with 6 against the Royals, and so if they take a night off, it won't be their fault.
Will not be their fault. Like you mentioned, Chuck, that they have that spot locked in. So they won the AL Central. There is no movement for them to go. They could lose out and still be okay. Yeah. But of course, now it's the time to build momentum heading into October, not the time to be on the downward spiral. Also want to shout out Garth Drick again for that donation, and to remind all the listeners and viewers right now to like, comment, and subscribe. Those are really the best things you guys can do to help out our channel if you're enjoying the content we're giving you. We truly appreciate everything. And wow, so we're going to save Jeff's best bet on this matchup for later in the show. We have Chuck looking at the Rays to pull off this matchup, and now we're going to head into our second of 3 roundtable games. We are going to look at the Seattle Mariners hosting the Texas Rangers. We have the Seattle, of course, they're currently holding on to that final wild card spot. They have a decent-sized lead over the Orioles. So, of course, Baltimore right now, they're playing tied 2-2 in Boston. Orioles fans certainly need that victory. We had a pitching matchup. John Gray going for the Rangers, 7-7 on the year, 3.64 ERA, 1.11 WHIP. Marco Gonzalez going for Seattle, 10-15, 4.05 ERA, and 1.33 WHIP. The Seattle Mariners absolutely love playing the Texas Rangers. They're dominating the season series 13-5. And looking at this matchup, though, in terms of line movement, Seattle opened this game as -125 home favorites, and Texas was plus money on the money line. Now Seattle's gone down to -118, and Texas is actually -101. The total is sitting at 7.5. Very interested in this matchup because, again, Seattle's had a shaky month, to say the least. And again, this is the time to build momentum and not kind of try to lose it. Baseball is certainly a marathon, not a sprint. So we're going to start with you, Jeff. Where are you seeing value in this matchup?
Oh, sorry, guys. This is a tough one for me today, but it's still one that's catching my eye because, like you mentioned, Seattle's 3-8 in their last 11 games, even after their win last night. And prior to last night's win, they had 5 straight games that they allowed 5 or more runs before holding Texas to just 1 run last night. But Rangers don't have much to play for. They're not doing much better. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. You mentioned John Gray's on the mound, but I was amazed to see his last 3 starts. He has a 1.35 ERA and a whip of this one's not quoted. I believe it's 0.54 over his last 3 starts. And Texas is 0-3 in those games. So I don't even know what to do with those numbers because those are some impressive pitching stats. But if Texas can't put enough runs to support that, and a bullpen can't back that, then unless I'm looking for 5, I can't back that on a bet. So I'm looking a little more for the. My one concern is how Texas hits lefties, but outside of that, Seattle's kept the total low. The score low, in the total when looking at facing pitchers with good control. So they're 25-6 to the under against a starting pitcher that has under 1.75 walks per start. And they're 16-3 to the under against a starting pitcher who strikes out 5 or more batters in the game. So they can get some contact but they get outs on those kind of batters. They can't put up the runs, and Texas doesn't really have the offense to support that either. I have a small lean on that under, but I am a little scared with how Texas has shown that they can potentially hit a lefty. They haven't done much to show it recently, but there is some potential there, and this total's only 7 with these 2 pitchers. So small lean on the under, but I'm probably staying away from this game, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Jeff. It's a very tough game to take a look at because it's hard to back the Rangers on that money line against a lefty, like you mentioned. If you want to take that plus 1.5, you're paying -200 in juice at the bare minimum. So it's a very difficult game to pick a side unless you have a strong feeling on a total or one of these teams on the money line. So that's a great point. So, Dr. Chuck, do you have any insight on this game, or are you kind of feeling like Jeff and myself where, of course, small Thursday slate, a bunch of games already happening. Maybe this is not the game to really put a wager in on.
Yeah, no, I think that. So speaking of fascinating, I love that this is fascinating too, because I talk a lot about the different sites that we use and all the different analysis that we have to obtain to do this job. I love Tankathon for all sports, but Tankathon sounds like, something that for the draft. But what it also tells you is what teams have left. After the Mariners play the Rangers tonight, they have 7 games against the A's, and I can't remember the other team that they're playing. It might be the Rangers again, but only the Cardinals play a schedule left with a lower winning percentage on the season. So what does that mean? I don't really know if you want to be Seattle and go to Cleveland. I don't know if Cleveland wants to face Seattle either way, but I think if the Mariners can take advantage of this situation with the Rays having a tougher schedule and the Blue Jays also, and what they can do is win out. They have 8 games left. If they were to win 7, 6, 7, 8 of these games and move into that spot where then they host the 3 games facing either the Rays or Blue Jays, I think that's extremely dangerous. I think Scott Service has got to get these guys motivated for that. Jeff brought up exactly what I think is happening with the line. John Gray has looked unstoppable. And I don't know if people pay attention when they look at those numbers. I don't know if they see that the Rangers haven't won when he doesn't have a crooked number there. And so I would be all over the Mariners in this spot. I can't believe the line has shortened. I don't need a lot of extra incentive to back a team to beat the team inside of a series that they just allowed 1 run in. Yesterday was just a measly 3-1 win. Rangers can't put any offense together. Mariners need to step it up and build that momentum. And they have to know, these teams have to know what is in front of them, what's on their schedule, and what it means. it's going to be hard for the Rays and Jays to match anything if the Mariners win 8 in a row. And so, and they can do so, especially if they can get one tonight with Marco Gonzalez on the mound, who hasn't been great, not a guy I love to back, but has an FIP that's been pretty fantastic against the Rangers this season. And I mean, I think you're getting the Mariners at $1.20, and I don't understand it, and I would probably hammer it.
Yeah, no. So you hear from Dr. Chuck. So it looks like he might need to be running to the ticket window after this one and putting in the last minute ticket because he talked himself into looking at Seattle. And it's hard to argue, especially in a situation like this where Seattle, has completely dominated the season series against the Rangers. The fact that Seattle has one of the weaker schedules, this is actually a question I'm going to bring back to you, is that, and again, I don't think there is a right or wrong, but I'm just curious your thought process here, Chuck. Is that something that actually could end up being a negative because you're playing against a lower level of competition heading into the postseason? Or is it something that could be a positive because you remind yourself you could win baseball games and now you're running a little bit of momentum into October?
I don't think, I guess my personal opinion, and I'm not in the minds of these guys, but I don't think, luckily the commissioner or whoever it is that structures the schedule structures it like in the NFL, where you're going to face the teams in your division that you have the most history with. When you play a team 19 times in a season, even if it's a 6-month season, you're irritated with them, you don't like them, you want to beat them, and that's who you always finish with. And so I don't think it's a negative playing bad teams. I don't think it's going to be a negative for the Guardians playing bad teams. But then at the same time, it depends. Is the bad team really motivated to win out at the end? I think the Mariners are just young and up and coming, and they don't have that kind of fade into the playoff type situation. Plus, I mean, the Orioles aren't fake. You can't mess around. If they were to screw around and be like, I think we're already in, the Orioles, like you said, they're not backing down and might get the Red Sox today. The only question I have is that makes me wonder, and you joked that I talked myself into it. The reward for getting into that 4 or 5 spot is the Astros. They were like 7-12, I think, against the Astros on the season. So maybe that's not a reward, but it's a full series, not just a 3 at home. You definitely want to get into the 4 spot. All 3 of these teams have to wanting to be in the 4 spot to host 3 home games.
Certainly do.
Can I add one thing to that, Eric?
Of course. So
I don't know if it's a Cleveland thing, but I am so glad that we are clinched into a position. I'm obviously happy that we clinched the conference. Maybe it's just Cleveland, but Kansas City has a bad history of ruining the end to our season because I guess my point is I think that there is a negative to it, at least for the Guardians, because we have a bad history, I think, of underestimating. You mentioned it. I think Cleveland has a history of underestimating that opponent to end the season. Playing 6 against the Royals, I wouldn't exactly feel completely confident if we weren't clinched into this position. So, maybe Seattle is a little more confident against Texas. Maybe it varies team to team, division to division. But if we weren't locked into this, I wouldn't be counting out Kansas City to come in those last 6 games and want to play spoiler. We talked about it yesterday. What is a team's motivation to play spoiler? I think Jesse said it. And how far does that motivation go? Well, I think it goes real far when you're talking about conference or division opponents, because the only thing that you have left to play for is ruining the hopes and chances of your worst enemy, basically. So I think there is a negative if you sit back and think it's an easy end to your year.
I think that's a fantastic point.
Yes.
And I actually do lean that way because, as you can see, I mean, the Mets were able to squeak out that win against the Marlins. And, of course, they have the series with the Braves coming up. So those games aren't, as huge. But I think it's a great point that I've been writing about this in some of my breakdowns is when there is one sole motivation left on your season, and that is to screw over a team that you have played, like you said, Chuck, 19 times over the course of the year, then, that is something that will build a sense of urgency. And depending on the team that they're facing, that does certainly make things a little bit more difficult as well. Before we head into our last roundtable game, I wanted to mention that we have a promotion going on at SportsMemo. It's an absolutely fantastic one. When you are checking out, use promo code MLB159, and that'll give you all access to any handicapper that has been on Full Count this week. $159 for the rest of the season through the World Series. This offer expires on Sunday night, and I would certainly make sure you guys run to SportsMemo to use that on either Jeff or Chuck, or preferably both of them. But moving forward to our third and final roundtable game, and I actually love the answer to that question. I love that little roundtable that we had right there. It wasn't a straightforward yes or no, so we got some different opinions there. But we're going to the NL West, where the Dodgers, another team that has absolutely had the number of their opponent tonight, facing the San Diego Padres. The Dodgers as well are 13-5 on the season against San Diego. And we've talked about it on this show kind of ad nauseum that the San Diego Padres did so many things to bolster their team, but the dividends are not really fully being paid out just yet. But they're able to hop the Phillies for that spot in the NL wildcard. I mean, the Phillies, lucky for them, we're not talking about them today because they are in serious danger of losing that spot. The Milwaukee Brewers are just 0.5 games behind them in the NL wildcard. But looking at this matchup, the Dodgers, of course, they have nothing to play for realistically except for building some more momentum heading into October. I mean, absolute juggernaut of a team. They're going with Buster Gatterall tonight at 2.89 ERA and a .94 WHIP as an opener. Steven Wilson is going for the Padres. He'll be in the opener position as well. Both these pitchers are predominantly relievers. Wilson on the season, 1.88 ERA, 1.04 WHIP. San Diego needs these wins more than anything, and the team that they cannot find wins against, when a lot of teams can't find wins against, is the Los Angeles Dodgers. This matchup, even without a starting pitcher listed for San Diego for a while, opened at Dodgers -110, and now it's sitting at Dodgers -137. So we're looking at potentially seeing some money back in the Dodgers. Able to beat the Padres last night, 1-0. So if you were like me, where you recommended the Padres plus 1.5, 1.5 beats one every time. So very excited. We're going to go to Chuck to start this one off. Dr. Chuck, where are you looking to find some value in this matchup?
I love that you had that plus 1.5 last night. That was one of the looks I had, but I just liked the under 7.5. Just right off the bat, that's where I would look again. I don't have the SDQL in front of me, so I don't know if one of you two wants to look it up. If it doesn't really matter, but if neither team scores in 9 innings of baseball, I'm taking the under the next day. It's not something that snaps open. It's just value. If you get the same number, especially, the books don't even adjust it. I don't care that these teams both have openers. It's not like specialization is kind of what baseball does now. Gratterall is going to give way to Haney, but we discussed off air. Well, Andrew Haney is usually a starter. Why would he not be a starter? Well, Soto's probably in the 2 hole. Machado's probably in the 3 hole. I don't know if Steven Wilson has better numbers. I don't have the BVP numbers on either of them in front of me. But logic seems to tell me that Bob Melvin must be like, you get these 2 guys out, and then we'll see if Haney, not Bob Melvin, that's Dave Roberts, switch to the other side. But it might be the same way because there's talk of the Dodgers top 3, 4 in the lineup being the best ever. I know that no one wants to ever hold a ticket on a Dodgers under. I know that grosses them out and it's hard to swallow, but that's where I would be again. I don't have a good feel on the side, and I think Jeff is going to have a little bit of a disagreement with me on this, but it's really just a pure, similar to the Mariners beating the Rangers 3-1. I don't like lineups to within one day come back the next day. Sometimes it even starts earlier on a Thursday than the previous game, and to just suddenly have offense. It doesn't matter who the pitchers are, because even the worst pitchers can beat up on a lineup that just isn't in sync.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's not like the Padres bullpen. I mean, they made some moves to bolster at the deadline. Again, haven't fully paid the dividends yet, but we're talking about a very good ball club either way. Dodgers, everything speaks for themselves, but the Padres are good as well. I'm just going to interject quickly. We have the Red Sox have scored a run now, so they're up 3-2, heading to the 7th in Baltimore. So for all baseball fans, just keep your eye on that.
Go ahead and tell them what you wanted.
Oh yeah, what couldn't happen? What was your best bet gonna be?
Come on.
I was riding the Boston Red Sox.
Have it
in the chat this morning on the money line, but I did a poor job of my hosting duties and did not check the start of that game time. So we are fingers crossed that the Red Sox are still going to take this W. And that's not the hate against Baltimore. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. And I found very interesting just looking now that the Orioles this season have a 0 run differential, which is actually kind of amazing. Digression aside, though, we're going back to San Diego. Jeff, how are you viewing this Padres Dodgers game?
So, Dr. Chuck, to answer your question, it's happened 20 times this season that it's been a 0-0 game after 9 innings. The total is it's 7, 11, and 2 over under. So it's 11, 7, and 2 to the under. But in the last 18, it's 5, 11, and 2 over under. So 11 times it's hit out of the last 18. It's only happened 20 times this season prior to last night. But, something you actually said earlier before we started the show, Dr. Chuck, is what is changing my view on this game. And it's the fact that I was looking at the 2 relief pitchers going today, and Andrew Heaney coming in the second inning, I think changes my viewpoint. I was actually riding the opposite of you in the first 5, looking at the total, thinking that at a 7, we're getting a 3-ish in the first 5, maybe 3.5, maybe 4 against 2 bullpen games. So I was looking over a bounce back in that situation. But with Heaney going in there, I think I'm taking Jesse's view again. I think I'm staying away from this Dodgers game. It was kind of impressive. I was looking at Gratterall, who's going for the Dodgers. He's got some pretty good numbers. He's got 43 appearances this year, but his 3 saves give him exactly 3 more saves than he has starts on the season. So seeing him in the first inning isn't something that we've done. He's got a 2.89 ERA and he's got a 0.94 whip, but he's gone just 56 and 2/3 innings in those 43 appearances. Going to get a long game out of the bullpen. I think he's only thrown more than 3 outs in 10 of those 43 appearances. And the last time he did that was August 24th. And he's never gone more than 6 outs in an outing this season. The Dodgers are getting kind of back on track. They've won 4 out of their last 6 after they dropped 3 out of the last 4 in a stretch last week. And it ends a 3-game winning streak for the Padres. So they were riding good for a while. I was looking, that was only the 3rd time this month. That was the 3rd time this month that San Diego was shut out. But that was only the 11th time this entire season that they were shut out. The fact that the Dodgers are 49 and 19 now, actually they're 50 and 19 now after the win last night, makes it hard to bet against them. I almost look at the money line opening at that and say, I gotta back the Dodgers, because at what point, don't you kind of jump on the value? I feel like the only reason that people didn't want to bet on them or wanted to avoid them the entire season was because you don't want to bet them as a minus 200. And some of the times it was hard to bet them on the run line, so you minimize the value. But in this situation, I think there might be value on the Dodgers. But on the other hand, that little stint that we talked about in the last one, I think this is the situation that I might even be more comfortable as San Diego closing out this season against a Dodgers team. Because as we mentioned, the Royals have no risk to trying to end the Guardians season. In this situation, there is a risk to the Dodgers, because the reason they're throwing a bullpen game, the reason they might not be playing all their guys, is because they're not worried about that. There's a risk that is injury, and you don't want to deal with those injuries in the playoffs. So in this situation, it might be better to face a team that's clinched closing out the year, that has nothing to play for other than the risk of injury in the postseason, as opposed to playing somebody that you might underestimate, like we talked about earlier.
I think that is a fantastic point, but I'm actually going to agree with you on the first thing you said, where there's just too much value on Los Angeles on that money line. It's very, very far and few between where you do see Los Angeles under $150, let alone under 200 on a money line. And given that the way that this market has moved, I mean, of course, there was some uncertainty with the pitching that was going to be coming out from San Diego, but the way that it went from minus 110 opening to the consensus line being around minus 140 right now for Los Angeles is telling me that some smart people are backing Los Angeles, and I would certainly like to hop on that train with them as well. But we have made it to the final segment, of course, the best bets for our show today. And before we get into it, because I know everybody is waiting on the edge of their seat for Jeff's best bet on that Cleveland game, I would like to mention that the Orioles have tied it up top of the 7th, 3-3 baseball game at Fenway. So the Orioles are working as hard as they can to keep that game alive and keep their season alive. But we're going to go to Jeff. Jeff, talk to me. What's your best bet for the show? How are you seeing the Guardians versus Rays game tonight?
I'm going to go. Dr. Chuck kind of segued into it earlier, talking about who Cleveland wants to play into this postseason. I'm back in Cleveland tonight, and I don't know who we want to play. I went with Tampa in the opener. I'm going Cleveland tonight, but I can tell you one of two things. Either Cleveland wants to play Tampa Bay, or Cleveland wants to go into this postseason riding the hottest hot streak that they can do, and more impressively, looking forward into the future. Jose Ramirez was the only starter last night that played, and Oscar Gonzalez, and Naylor, a couple. Sorry, 6 guys played that don't play normally, and they still pulled this out. They had their 29th game-winning RBI coming after the 7th inning. That leads the league. They're one ahead of New York. With these guys playing that I haven't even heard of, some of them, and being a fan of Cleveland and putting on a game like that shows you the pitching staff. Tristan McKenzie went yesterday, and if the season started this year on July 6th, I would make every argument in the world that Cal Quantrill could be in serious contention for this Cy Young. Cleveland's won 14 of his last 15 starts. 7 of those last 15 starts they were minus 125 or more towards a dog, including a dog, which means 7 out of 15 of those games weren't games against the Kansas City Royals. They weren't games against teams that Cleveland was supposed to come out and dominated. They were either an underdog or they were a favorite of no more than minus 125 in half of those games. They've won 12 of his last 14 starts in front of Cleveland, and they've won 6 of his last 7 starts against lefties. And you guys talked about Jeffrey Spring a little bit, so I'll keep it quick. You think he might be your saving grace because, Tampa Bay has only lost 6 Jeffrey Spring starts this season out of his 23 starts. But you look, half of those losses have came in just his last 6 road starts. So he's lost 3 of his last 6 road starts. 2 of those losses came to Kansas City and a last place Boston team where he allowed 6 earned runs in just 10 and a third inning combined. Give me Cleveland tonight.
There you have it. Jeff Michaels back in the Guardians, making it a streak from back in the Guardians. But if it ain't broke, do not fix it. He's going.
My first game was on Tampa, actually, against the Guardians. It was just in the Guardians game.
Gotcha. But again,
that's the head, not the heart.
The head, not the heart, which is, again, most importantly when betting, and you love to see it. I was a Commanders fan sitting in the stands with an Eagles money line ticket this past weekend. If that's any consolation of betting with the head, not the heart. That goes to the side. Dr. Chuck, talk to me. Best bet of the day.
Yeah, so I can make it short and quick. Honestly, I joked when I put my best bet out that it was just boring. It's a Athletics Angels under 7, AL games 7. It doesn't take a whole lot for me to be on that. Just like I like that under in the Guardians Rays spot here. The numbers speak for themselves, period. I like this number, period. If there were no teams involved, but Shohei Ohtani is in this spot, is 10 and 1 to the under. Break it down further as far as division, he's 8 and 1 to the under. He doesn't get a lot of run support. There's a situation here where he's playing a team that isn't one of the better teams in the league. He gets like 2.11 runs of support and gives up less. And so it's a great spot in general because it's Ohtani. Cole Irvin was kind of under, honey hole there early in the season. That's kind of gone away, but he gets the Angels. I don't like the Angels to score a lot of runs ever when Ohtani's on the mound. He is probably in the 3rd hole behind Trout or maybe in the 2 hole ahead of Trout. I don't think that helps anybody out after he this is a home game. He comes off the mound and is going to bat right then in the top of the 1st. It starts off poorly. And just in general, divisional opponents in September that have 450 or less winning percentage, it's like 25 and 11 to the under facing off in this spot. that's without taking into account that there's actually a big favorite. You take a big favorite into account and you approach 85%. And so it's just, you get that 7, you also don't have to worry about, you get hosed here. It's 3-3, not that I want you to push, but I think this is a 3-3 ceiling. And so I like it to be more like 3-2, 3-1. I think Ohtani dominates the Athletics in one of his last starts of the season.
Absolutely love that angle, and absolute shame that we will not be seeing Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout playing baseball this October, and looking like absolutely ever.
He hasn't yet.
He hasn't yet, and only time will tell if they can soon. But we want to thank all the viewers for taking their time to watch the Full Count MLB Sports Betting Show. Please like, subscribe, and comment. That's the best way to grow the channel. And do not forget to use promo code MLB159 to get the rest of any of the cappers on Full Counts end of season through the World Series, just $1.59. Using that on Dr. Chuck or JM Sports are my recommendations, so you should certainly take a look. On behalf of Jeff, Chuck, myself, and the rest of the SportsMemo family, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, and best of luck for all your bets tonight.